Hi everyone, welcome to today's Facebook Live session organized by D Y Patil Deemed University. I'm Alisha Chandran and I'm really excited you're here because today we're going to be exploring a field that touches every part of our lives, be it our air, water, food, and even the climate that we live in. This field is environmental science and one that's extremely close to my own heart. Now, if you've ever wondered what kind of career can you have in this field, can science really change the world around you, or is it just limited to textbooks? How do you solve problems like pollution, drought, or waste? Well, then you're in the right place. Today, we have with us someone who hasn't just studied these environmental problems, but has actually helped solve them at scale. Dr. Rakesh Kumar is the president of the Society of Indoor Air and formerly served as mission director at the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, where he led India's national research efforts on carbon usage and storage and capture. He holds an MTech in Environmental Science and Engineering from IIT Bombay and earned his PhD in Environmental Engineering from CSIR NEERI, which is one of India's premier research institutions. Dr. Kumar was also the chief scientist and head of the CSIR NEERI Mumbai Zonal Division before becoming the director of CSIR NEERI from 2016 to 2021, during which he spearheaded groundbreaking work on air pollution control, urban air quality, wastewater recycling, and climate health linkages. His 5-turret wastewater treatment system has become a national model for eco-friendly innovation, and his work has led to 18 patents on pollution control devices, including 3 international ones. Over the years, he has received 9 prestigious awards, and I'm just going to list a very few of them. One is the Commonwealth Commission Award from the UK, the Environmental Leadership Award from USAID, the Vasvik Award for Urban Environmental Solutions, and more recently, the Green Excellence Award for Wastewater Innovation. He's also been an adjunct professor with the Center for Environmental Science and Engineering at IIT Bombay and continues to guide young minds on science, innovation, and policy. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, let's start from the very beginning, right? So, what was your childhood like? And were you always interested in science, or was that something that came to you a lot later?
So, at our time, I would not say that it was very natural to take science, but those were only 2-3 disciplines that you can think of. So, if you want to go for engineering or in medicine, you have to take science. And probably we didn't have those options being discussed at home as well. I was very good in mathematics, so it was a very natural thing to go for science, and that's how I veered around science, frankly speaking.
So math led to science for you. That's wonderful. And so then what inspired you to pursue environmental engineering as compared to, those conventional fields that you had at the time?
So we are talking about, year 1983, 84. That's when I moved towards environment. And this was just emerging at that time. Even in IIT, when I got admission, people are saying that if you go in the field of environment, you might not get a job. And that was a big if for our generation, that the whole purpose of study was to get a job.
Correct.
It was not to satisfy your so-called inner calling in that sense.
Right.
But yes, there were 2 things which were very interesting for me, which I found. One is that I liked maths, that was one. And the second thing, chemistry and physics was very natural for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that environmental science as a subject required almost different kind of disciplines to come together.
Right.
And it so happened I was in IIT and IIT had this center. The moment I came to know, I said, okay, let me try. So there was no prior design to the whole thing.
Right. So it was just very organic for you. One thing led to another. That's wonderful. Right. And so that leads me to my next question. So if someone asks you, what is environmental science? How would you explain it in your own words?
So there are some classical definition, and in a classroom, we would probably teach that definition of environmental science. But in current times, if you see environment science or environment as such is anything that impacts you directly, indirectly. So earlier, I would just explain it a little better so that you get a sense of it. India used to have one act which was called Bengal Smoke Nuisance Act in 1905, before independence. And in those days, what it meant was that if you create any nuisance by way of burning anything, someone can go to police and complain. That was called Bengal Smoke Nuisance Act. That was the only environment act that I remember, before independence. But now when you see, it's not nuisance which is close by, but someone polluting your river somewhere is impacting you. Some other countries are emitting carbon dioxide. This climate change is changing you here. The whole domain of geography has changed, and that's why we say that in and around anything that is happening is environment, and there are a whole lot of disciplines which are now combined. Earlier, it was those who know this field. In 1960s, when environmental engineering per se came in, it was mainly civil engineers who were into it. And there was a course at the end of, I think, 4th or 5th year. It was called Public Health Engineering. And that public health engineering would only talk about water and wastewater. And that's where we are. So now, imagine from 60s, we added air, we added hazardous waste, we added climate change, name it, and we have added so many things.
Right. It's almost like the laws sort of went hand in hand with the educational system.
Absolutely.
And so one can say that environmental science is a system science, right? Where you're combining different things around you, different disciplines around you, and trying to solve very everyday problems that we have in our lives, right?
Maybe you can even elaborate that way. So earlier, environmental science was to control pollution. Now it is more of a domain of preventing and conserving.
Right.
And then these definitions will go on changing as we progress further.
Wonderful. So let's get into a little more about you. So what does your typical day look like? Do you spend a lot of your time, and I know now you have more advisory roles, but if you go back to your your days when you were at your peak, what did your typical day look like? Was it spent a lot in the lab? Were you out in the field a lot? Were there a lot of meetings? What was your typical day like?
I think the later part of my career, it had a lot of meetings, for sure. But I always loved looking at certain areas which requires deeper attention. I had this, I would say, interest to get and speak to some of the researchers and sit with them and look at the nitty-gritty of how these things are working, not working. So the reason why I have so many patents or so many technologies is that I still love solving a problem which is there. So even if I'm spending a lot of time in meetings, I would always take out time to do some research, making some devices, thinking of some ideas which can possibly address specific solutions.
So would you say that as an environmental scientist, you feel that the patterns that you come up with or the solutions that you come up with, you actually get to see them work in real time, unlike probably some other fields where if you're working in semiconductors, for example, where you might not get to see how your product is actually working? Do you feel like environmental science is one of those fields?
Yeah, so I will put it differently. Right? It's not that the subject that we're talking about, this versus that. Even in my early career of about 7-8 years when I started into this field, there was a whole lot of theoretical research which I did.
Right.
And we published papers, we were very excited. But after a point, I realized that, unless until you see things working outside and solving a real life problem, I don't get that excited.
Right.
So I changed my track after 7-8 years of so-called research, which were in laboratory and publishing papers, which I still do.
Right.
But yes, nothing like getting into field, solving the problem.
Practically seeing your hard work at play. Absolutely. So the other thing now is that a lot of students and just people in general hear terms like climate change and air pollution, but a lot of the times that these terms might feel very far off. So if you can give us an example of how environmental science actually touches a common person's life, in what ways can it actually affect us, to give people an understanding?
Yeah, so I really appreciate that point. So climate change, let's take climate change first and then pollution.
Right.
Climate change, we talked about temperature change, and I also felt in the beginning, what is that when you say our scientists, group of scientists will tell you that 1 degree centigrade temperature rise will happen, and it is catastrophic, and 1.5 degree and then 2 degree. Whereas those who live in some of the hotter region of India, they know it's anytime 35, then 45, 48.
Right.
And so where is this 0.5 and 1 degree centigrade difference? But the science part is something which is explaining it to us. There's something called malaria window, which a lot of people in the public domain of health sciences, they knew that there is a malaria window. What actually it means is there are certain months of the year when you have more malaria related incidents which come to hospital, because the mosquitoes are growing more in that period. Now this 1 degree temperature change or half a degree temperature change, there are many regions of our country and elsewhere, the malaria window has expanded. So earlier it was just 2 months, 3 months. Now you have malaria cases almost 8 months. And what is actually the reason is that you have humidity and the temperature combination change in a way that mosquitoes are growing more and more.
Yeah.
And therefore you have a health related issue. So did we hear earlier dengue cases? Malaria was something common, not dengue and
not as much.
So this is one example of climate change giving you the health related issues. The second thing which is very close to us, Mumbai, Navi Mumbai, Delhi, all those people who live there, is the rain pattern. So Mumbai as such was known for its rainy season tourism. People used to come and enjoy their rains here because they knew the rains would be there for a longer period.
Right.
The number of rainy days have declined almost 30 to 40% in this region. Whereas total amount of precipitation or total rain amount remains same, more or less. So that tells you that things are changing, and when you have large volume of water precipitating in a shorter period of time, you will have flood, you will have disaster, and it's no more enjoyment for any tourist or the locals.
Correct.
So these are climate change impacts which we can explain to local in a local place in a particular context. Then the larger context, what is happening is that some of the rivers flow, and most of our major rivers in India, they are only flowing because of glaciers in the upper Himalaya side. Yeah. Now, the moment you have more and more of that temperature rise, this 1 degree temperature change can actually melt a lot of glaciers. And in coming years, the amount of water coming in all throughout the year would vary a lot. And that is now being impacted, and you can see some of the states are experiencing drought, an extended period of no water or less water. So that's something which is cause of concern.
Right. So it's essentially something that touches our lives all the time, but maybe over the years, because it's happening so gradually, we don't realize the impact of it as much as we actually should.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you look at the pollution aspect, and that's again very closer to everybody's thinking process. What is that 5 microgram per meter cube, which increases or 10 microgram, and that too in air you talk about some microgram thing, which is not visible as such. But what happens is that we have seen it. Many people throughout the year, you would see that they're coughing almost every time.
Yeah.
And no concert, no cinema halls where you can sit and experience 1 hour uninterrupted, no noise at all.
Very true.
And that's happening because these so-called tiny particles and the pollutants are actually corroding your throat, right? So you don't really have cough as such. You are not medically unfit, but you have a constant irritation in your body. And over a period of time, it will become persistent, and then you have to go to see a doctor.
Right.
So these pollutants, though may sometimes appear less, but would be impacting you for a longer period of time.
Yeah, that's something that we really should give ourselves some thought about. So you've worked on everything from air quality to river rejuvenation, carbon capture and storage. So is there one project that you're most proud of? Is there any one project like that?
Yeah, so there are 2-3 of them.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'll take up the one which was very close to our heart. So when we're looking at wastewater regime, although I worked in air pollution a lot, starting from my PhD, it was mostly air pollution. But water wastewater, if you see today, still India does not treat almost 70% of its wastewater, which we generate on a daily basis, right? And all of that goes through a drain and then to a river or pond wherever we are located. And then over a period of time, we realize that the water is not drinkable. We have to buy bottled water, all those things.
Right.
In our lifetime, we have seen that from tap, we have shifted to bottled water.
I don't even know a time when anybody drank tap water, honestly.
It did that. So we figured it out that if the government has to spend money the way it is spending at the rate, it will be a Herculean task to do treatment of all of these wastewater in one go. So we developed a system where we looked at combination of biological, physical, chemical and the engineering part of it. Can we treat our wastewater, the sewage, in the drain itself while it is flowing into the drain? And it's important to know, all of us, that that so-called dirty black water that you see in the drain has only 1.5% polluted. The rest, 98.5% is just water.
Right.
So in the current situation of water becoming so scarce, costly,
right,
why are we wasting? Our drains are more perennial than the rivers.
Correct.
Right? So we devised a method, we called it Renew. Is a word to renew the related things, and then see to it that it is treated at within 3 to 4 months. You can create that system in the drain itself. Water becomes clean enough so that it can be going into the river and ponds without any major harm. And after doing some research, piloting, we implemented in last Kumbh in Prayagraj. That was 1819 period. And we did that for 5 major drains over there. And they were, online someone can go and see those results. That water was so clean enough that a lot of people felt that it's drinking water. So we did that, and those wastewater after treatment were actually going into the area where this Sangam, confluence is, right? So I am really very proud of all the team members who worked on that very hard.
That's definitely something to be extremely proud of, and I wish that this was advertised more and people knew more about this, because it's something that it's an important area to work on, and it's an important job that you all have done. So kudos to you for that. So how is this system different from the 5-turret system that you have created, the wastewater?
So it actually got derived from 5-turret.
Okay.
Right. So the first. These days you hear these words like nature-based solution or nature-inspired solution. I'm talking about 2003, 2004 when we put first 5-turret system in University of Mumbai Kalina campus. So Kalina campus had groundwater which was saline, so they couldn't use for their so-called gardening purposes.
Right.
And enough BMC supply was not coming to take care of all of that. So that time, the Vice Chancellor and the Pro-Vice Chancellor, they said, let's do something about wastewater. And I said, we have done some experiment. Would you want to do it?
Right.
On a big scale. I said, let's do it. I give credit to them for agreeing to actually implement it.
Right.
So in that case, that is an example of what environmental science can do.
Right.
So phyto-red is a combination of phyto means plants, right? And red meaning getting rid of pollutants in the water. So there was a botany student who was working with me as an intern, and I told him, I don't understand botany. You tell me how the root system works. And he figured out which are those plants which can do following things. So the first set of our idea was that these are the plants where the roots will grow faster, and it does a great job. I said, no, we don't want roots which can grow faster. We want root which can remove the pollutants faster, right? So we did back and forth, and then we figured it out that there are some wetland plants which are perennial throughout the year, they survive. They can remove pollutants on a priority basis. And that is something which can be used for this purpose. And after the implementation, we realized that was the first example of nature-based solution in this country.
Wow.
Which we did. We didn't call it nature-based.
Right.
And now there are a lot of variants of phyto-red across India. people are implementing it, doing it, and I'm so glad
That's wonderful. I think it's important to point out here that, when we talk about these nature-based solutions, they say that the pinnacle of engineering is when you can actually emulate nature and come up with solutions for problems like these. So I think it's very important for our audiences to, give kudos to Sir here, because it's amazing that you were able to do that such a long time ago when it wasn't even, something that people knew about or thought about. So
it was difficult to convince people that
right.
plants are doing this.
Of course.
There's a whole lot of people who came and said, where is the plant? Meaning, where is the working system? So they expected some mechanical fan to be operating, the pump to be operating. There's something moving in that system.
Right.
Nothing moving, right? So it was amazing, and it took almost 6-7 years to convince people that this is what the sewage treatment plant is.
I think that's the biggest hurdle that we face as researchers and scientists, is convincing people that this is actually working, and please let us, test it out and implement it. But that's really cool. Like, I'm personally a huge fan of yours now. Not kidding. Okay, so let's move on to the next question here. So I'd like to ask you, so you've done so many projects, you've worked with so many people. What kind of challenges have you faced as, someone who is leading a project? And how are a few ways that you overcame those challenges?
So I think these challenges of implementing any project comes in all fields. So it's not something which is unique. In the field of environment, when we specifically look at all of the areas that we go supposedly are something which are not good looking. So you're talking about sewage, which is dark,
right,
smelling. Municipal solid waste, which is again the same.
Correct.
Whether it is waste from industry, it's the same thing. There are certain other areas of environmental science which are good looking and you need to solve. Those are biodiversity, animal
conservation,
conflict related issues, and energy transition related. Those things are not as dirty. So I think this temperament is very important for the team members, and it's important that we also do all that convincing in the beginning. So once you have taken up the project, if you have a team member who is not willing to give 100%, you would have a hard time. And that's why whatever difficulty that I faced, I would say, was with respect to the team members who were aligned to the overall objective. So wherever we got right objectives in place, things were all okay. And lastly, I would say in this domain is communication is the key. So you cannot be ordering around saying that you must do following things, and I think once you have convinced the person why it is important, right, they'll be able to do it. Right. So give them freedom. Yeah, I was very successful at that. You have a very amicable personality, sir. I'll be surprised if you weren't successful in convincing people to get things done. Moving on to career paths. So what are the different kinds of career paths that someone who's pursuing environmental science, can look forward to, besides being, of course, a researcher, which is something that someone would immediately think of? So I went into the research and also looked at various things which can happen in this domain. It has opened up so much, and I'm just talking about the environment as such. Currently, I possibly can't list out, but there are at least 20 domains in the environment-related field which one can get engaged in, earn money, or do a job, or you can do your own entrepreneurship. Right. So if I can give some examples, which is recent ones. The traditional ones were always water treatment, wastewater treatment, air pollution control, hazardous waste. Of course. Right, that was there. But now you have people are looking forward to someone who understands sustainability, who can advise on the basis of design for environment. How can you design a system which can possibly be used for recycling? Not that after it has been used and then throw it and then somebody recycles. Right. So you design for recycling. You design for its repair. Right. And I always give this example, which is which is in our normal domain. That one good example of design for environment is eating cone ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
That you eat the ice cream as well as the cone.
Right.
So there's no garbage generated.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? So similarly, these concepts are coming up, and people need social scientists to come in, design people to come in, the domain expert who do the assembly part of it, mechanical engineers and people like that, and then the social scientists to also understand whether it will be acceptable to people outside or not.
Correct.
So that's one area, whole lot of work. The second major work where people are looking forward to is who can explain conservation to people.
Mm-hmm.
How conservation works, whether it is for tree, biodiversity, marine, anything of that kind. The people who are required for this purpose. The third emerging ones I am saying in the domain of climate change, when the transitioning is happening, when you are shifting from say fossil fuel to say electric,
Right.
or you are changing from one kind of job to another kind of factory, right? You need someone to actually explain that how things are moving. So a whole lot of retraining is required. So you need people who can train them.
Right.
So somebody who was working in a coal mine has to now work in a solar plant, which is very different.
Right.
So how do you explain that social aspect and also train them? So that's another domain. I would also think that internationally, a lot of jobs have started appearing with multinationals who are looking for people who can understand their business and then advise them long term what is needed to be done. And that is a domain which again needs knowledge of finance, needs data analytics, needs people who can understand social and technical things together.
Right. So you don't necessarily have to be an environmental scientist to be able to work in the field. And of course, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about the social aspects, the economic aspects, and the environmental aspects working together. So that's essentially what everyone.
I think that myth is now broken.
Right.
It is not that only science can work in
Correct.
the environment.
Yes.
It's not there.
Yeah, that's actually one of my questions. You covered that. I was like, do you really need to be good at science to, make a career in the field? But there are so many other roles, creative roles, technical roles, design roles. And like you mentioned, the upskilling of workers when transitioning. So it basically covers a whole range of, jobs, right? From manufacturing to energy to anything that you can think of. So that's
I'll add
really
one more, which is becoming more and more in current time.
Right.
Many of these environment-related rules now in India, which started with one which I told you, Bengal Smoke No Act, and in 1971 we got Water Act, Water Pollution Prevention Act.
Yes.
81 we got Air Pollution Prevention Act. But 86 Act, the Environment Protection Act, when it came, it was just after the Bhopal tragedy happened. With Halasasanatli. So from 86 onwards, now when you see, we have more than 100 rules and regulations, more than 100. And I'm not including the international ones. So here in this case, the people who understand legality and its interpretation and then communicating. So all that High Court, Supreme Court, National Green Tribunal need experts who can feed in, and also legal people who understand. So there are some courses which are being offered specifically to lawyers to fight these cases on legal.
There's a lot of environmental law courses that are being offered. So a lot of compliance and law kind of roles.
And legal. Yes.
It's a whole rainbow of, opportunities out there. So, what are some exciting or emerging areas apart from the ones that you just, mentioned in the field that students should keep an eye out on? Like, I know that we've already mentioned a few now, but maybe in the future, maybe something related to AI or machine learning. What kind of fields can students keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so it's changing very fast, and that's true for almost all fields. Right?
Correct.
So here also, if you see botany, which was always extension botany and zoology, these two science disciplines, which was considered as almost part of environmental science. Most of the environmental science courses were taught by people from this discipline, right? And some chemistry and physics as well. But now what has happened that the traditional botany method that you go and identify a plant, look at the species and all that, is almost now 60% electronics. So a combination has happened, and what you said, artificial intelligence, the knowledge getting transferred.
Correct.
So now you have camera lenses and the devices, the so-called infrared devices, different kind of spectrophotometer design, which can actually tell that it's not only this plant is suffering from this disease.
Right.
How will it last? What is happening to this, and what kind of nutrients needed? So this whole thing is a very new game altogether, and that's where you need people from different kinds.
Correct.
So that's one emerging area. The second thing is where all this interpretation of environment is happening through satellites. So satellites have sensors which can possibly tell you what is happening on the ground.
Right.
So you need people who understand satellite pictures and their interpretation, and someone who can go on the ground and verify that this is what is actually happening.
Right.
So the second area which is emerging very fast in this domain. The third one is, I would call it transboundary movement, which are a little long term. It is not easily understood right now, but it will happen over a period of time. So it transboundary actually means something which was emitted in India has gone to Nepal, something from Nepal has gone to other continent.
Correct.
And how is that happening? Those studies are being done on a long-term basis. And so these are basically, I'm talking about research domain, where these are the areas which are emerging. In the other domain on environment is how the finances will work. Right. If you see economics, wherever economics is worked out, people have controlled their pollution-related things, and that's what they try to say, that Europe has been able to do its environmental job better because they're rich. India has to reach to that so-called GDP to preserve our environment, right? So in this case, what is happening is that any resources that we use currently is considered nature is given, therefore I can use.
Right.
The whole lot of work which is being done, emerging work in that area, how do you price them? That if you are using, if you are going to a forest or enjoying a forest area, or you are going to a, Himalayan glaciers to look at, you are actually exploiting the environment in one way or the other.
Correct.
So put a cost to it. So they call it environmental economics and payment for ecological services. So ecology has become a services. Earlier it was not so.
Correct.
And that's very fast emerging area in this field.
It's going to annoy a lot of people, I'm sure, but I think it's a necessity. So just to recap it, so we've got AI ML when it comes to app development, for example, or help in agricultural sciences, or even botany, zoology. We've got satellite imagery, GIS, where that's an emerging field. Of course, research is an ongoing thing that I think will never stop. And then we've got climate risk and environmental economics also as different fields that, are up and coming, and the transboundary research that we also spoke about. So a lot of different areas, a lot of exciting areas.
Yes.
And requiring a lot of different types of talents and people from different backgrounds and industries. So that's really good to know. So say that a student says that I want to, help the environment, but I don't really know where to start. So what would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, I think this is on, World Environment Day is coming on 5th of June. This question comes in, that what is that you can do yourself? And of course, there are traditional ways that save water at home and don't, create litter and garbage at home, composting, this, that. So besides that, the question is, besides that, what is that one can do? And I would say there are examples now emerging where people try to adopt their neighborhood things. So you can actually think of adopting your street, your 5 trees which are outside your society, a pond nearby or anything, and create that community of saving that place, right? If you can't do that physically, the minimum thing which you can do in the age of social media is that just link that situation of environment degradation, which could be footpath, road, trees, biodiversity, birds, which are around you, your college, school, society, and then write at least 10 letters to concern department and those people who are responsible.
Right.
This is important because sometimes we criticize so-called government that they're not doing it, but we haven't been communicating to them. Right. So while doing it, so I add one more chapter into that. There are again a lot of people who will send letters and emails and Twitter messages saying that this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Besides that, you also add 2 lines, what more can be done? This is what I feel should be done. So, you combine your communication, which is the fact, which is bad, and then you're also saying this is what I can...
Solution, I think that's a very important point that you made, and one that has been on my mind as well. That whenever people write, a lot of activists, they talk about the problems, but they somehow forget that the problem needs to have a solution. So if someone else isn't coming up with it, maybe you have a better way to do it and express that. Let people know of those solutions.
Either you give the solution or you say who can possibly solve
right. Or point to the person who can actually help with that instead of just talking about the problem, which then can make people jaded over time. When you're on social media and all you're looking at is problems and no real solutions, and after a point people stop caring about that problem altogether.
You saw that when the air quality in Mumbai got bad or worse than Delhi.
Right.
So there was only criticism saying that we are now Delhi. But no, and then people got tired after a point that how many times you can say the same.
So in a situation like that, say I'm somebody who doesn't really know much about environmental science or anything, but I do see that there's a problem and I don't really know where I can figure out a solution from or who I can ask. In that scenario, what would you suggest the person?
I think it's just 10th class. And what he said is that all that visibility issue that you see in the atmosphere is not only related to pollution, but it's also because the plants release certain kind of volatile organic compounds. And then over a period of time, sunlight, it converts into ground level ozone. Now that was something which he had not done anything. He had actually read somewhere.
Got it.
Right? And he just shared with me. He figured it out. I don't know from where he got my number. So he communicated. I'm sure you can't do immediately something, but it's important that more and more people understand. And therefore that communication keeps happening. There are some radical measures which is needed that can be kept separately. But you as an individual, when you want to do something, small things are good enough.
Even just...
It's secret time. This is a field which everyone is very open, so there's no secret. I was lucky to have a very good professor who guided me during my formative years. And one thing which he was very good at was timelines management. So if you want to tell your team members that it should be done in 7 days, you should be also doing it for yourself. So when somebody calls you and says, when can I meet? And you say, I'm busy. You should also say that I'm busy right now, but I'll be able to talk to you in half an hour, 1 hour. It's like, internal commitment which you are giving for your work and your every daily habits. So it gets ingrained in you. So even when you're talking to the junior most or the senior most, every time you communicate with proper timeline and commitment. So indirectly it comes in your mind that I need to do this on time. And that's what is, I'm not saying generic terms. In our society, timeline is something which we don't bother so much.
True, very true. I agree with you on that. But that's a very unique one actually, to enforce that same time management upon yourself that you're expecting from someone you're working with or someone who's your subordinate. That's very, very good advice.
Don't give open instructions. Please get it done, not that way. Just get it done by this time and report back to me.
And I will be there to receive your report at that time as well.
And you should also do the same.
Exactly. That's wonderful. That's really nice. And so what kind of mindset do you think students need to develop to stay motivated in the field? Because this is one field where the chances of getting dejected, belonging to it, I can say with some experience that sometimes you do get dejected where you're like, no matter what I do, things are not changing. So how do you stay motivated when, you get into those little phases?
But that's true for all fields. So
Mm-hmm.
that will happen. You will always have a phase when you feel demotivated and things like that. But yes, specifically when you take a certain cause, environment related things, and you want to do this, we have a lot of layers of society, bureaucracy, funding, a whole lot of things.
Yes.
So you would get demotivated at times, but it's important that in all of these things, keep one or two, some mentors around
Mm-hmm.
who can give you some advice
Mm-hmm.
to keep you updated. Uh, the second very important thing for motivation is that don't keep only one thing in front of you, because environment is such a interesting subject. A lot of people say it's too complex, too many things. People get confused what I need to do. But it also provides you that opportunity that if this one is not something which is moving forward, you can do something else as well.
Right.
And for that you should be ready to read little. I would not call it 360 degree, but at least 180-degree reading should be done.
Right.
One shouldn't. That era has gone.
Right.
Where you can say I'm an expert in water, or somebody say I'm expert of air pollution. No,
Right.
You will be in trouble because things are actually interconnected.
Right. You need to step out of that siloed thinking that we, unfortunately, our system has ingrained that in us. It's not just India, it's the world over where you have very like departmentalized thinking.
Yeah.
But maybe it's time people stepped out of that and started to get a more systems view of what's going on around.
It's important for your own mental. Passion part. I'm not talking about right now the job. So, but nowadays people are doing it, but they're only doing on social media. And things will not go very well if we just keep it on social media. Right. Because you don't really understand what the problem is. So that's the generation issue, can say. So spend at least 5% of your time in a month to just visit whatever you are thinking about and look at it. Right. So it could be your beach nearby, it could be your pond nearby, it could be your path nearby, and think what's actually happening. Go to ground zero and figure out what the reality of the situation is. So there's a lot of doomism and climate doomism and all that also happens because one person passes it on to the other without actually really knowing what's happening and what kind of solutions you can actually come up with. So that's a very good point. And I hope that people will keep that in mind because it's very important to know your problem, even physically, before you start spreading messages about it. And then my last question to you today is again a little deep. So if you could go back to your 17-year-old self, what's one piece of advice that you would give yourself? As you rightly said, it's a very difficult question. I don't even remember 17 years. But yes, one thing which was there is that we were very focused on a particular direction to only think about our jobs. That is in our generation. That you do study to get a job. That's the main focus. Right. But I think I would probably do some more thinking that what is that I could have done for society, what society related places, what is needed to be done. Those things never crossed my mind, and I think it could be just the structure that we were living in. I would do. That's the only small point that I would change. Otherwise, everything was
But I mean, despite that, you've done a lot for society, sir. I mean, everything that you've worked on so far has been for the
Yeah,
betterment.
but journey of life is not something which you can predict for
Of
20
course.
years.
Yeah.
So even 3 years, 4 years is difficult to predict. So it's like you do your hard work, be sincere to what you are doing. I'm probably repeating words which are very common. But I think it's not something which is to be taught separately. It must be ingrained in you.
Right.
So when mobile phones came, and I would call my father, and if it exceeds some 1 minute or something, he'll say, "Keep the phone. You should not waste money." And later on, I said, "No, no, now I earn enough, and therefore I can talk to you longer." He said, "So what? You must not do it."
Right.
Right. So that is the ingrained what you call it, the psyche which comes in, that this is what is right, therefore you will do it right.
Right.
You don't do it because someone else is teaching and therefore you have to teach it.
Correct. It has to come from within. That's wonderful. So this has been so wonderful. I've learned so much from you. I really hope that everyone who's watching has also learned from this very short interview session that I had with Sir. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for sharing, your views, and thank you for encouraging everyone who's watching. And I really hope that this has been a good session, and it will encourage you to participate more in the environmental problems around you and learn a bit more on the subject. So, thank you so much.